There are two general classifications of surveys, geodetic and plane. When measuring a small area, such as surveying for a small construction job, the area is assumed to be flat, aka the survey occurs on a flat plane. This is a plane survey. Because the world is not flat, vertical error results from this assumption. Over a distance of 300 feet, this error would only be 0.002 feet, negligible even for very precise projects. Along a 5-mile survey distance, however, this vertical distance error would be over 14 feet. When surveying a large area, such as a long highway or an entire state, it becomes imperative to account for the curvature of the earth. Becomes imperative. When surveying a large area, such as a long highway or an entire state, it becomes imperative to account for the curvature of the earth. Becomes imperative.
Okay, so this is something I just wanted to put out there real quick. It's actually something I've been chewing on for some time now, maybe several months since I first started thinking about the question of the Eurotunnel. So I guess we could call this just a page out of the diary of my random flat earth curiosities or whatever. So basically I've been wanting to look into this. I've been kind of interested in the idea of the Eurotunnel or Channel Tunnel or whatever you want to call it since listening to the various interviews with surveyors that I'm sure many of you have listened to. Several of these men who have come out now and talked about working their entire career never having accounted for the curve. So obviously projects like the Channel Tunnel, and there's a few others that are out there, like in Japan. These are especially interesting because obviously they're underground, and so they involve a very different process in terms of surveying and calculations. In terms of, it has to be very precise, and you're not just following the contours of the ground. It has to be even more precise, especially in the case of tunneling under a large body of ocean water, where the risk of collapse and the ocean water leaking in is an extremely real issue. So you would think that in a project like the Eurotunnel, that compensation for curvature would be paramount, and having to make sure that you didn't make a miscalculation and wind up tunneling too close to the bottom of the channel and endangering the lives of everyone involved. So I was curious, wanting to calculate, what the expected curvature should be for that amount of water and the length of the tunnel itself. The channel distance is 37 kilometers, and when you convert that into miles and calculate the curvature using inches, which is the way I'm accustomed to doing it, you come up with 349 feet of expected curvature. Now the tunnel itself, of course, is longer than the body of water because it enters in further inland. And so the full length of the tunnel from one entrance to another is 50.5 kilometers. And again, when you convert that into miles and calculate the expected curvature, you're looking at 656 feet of expected curvature. So I think most people who are already looking into the issue of curvature would probably already see why this would be of interest, because while that might not seem like a lot, and I know the detractors are already would just assume that this is just already being accounted for. In every documentary that I have now watched on this subject, and every thing online I could find where I was reading, I've just been looking everywhere I could to try and find mention of calculation of the curvature, and of course I have not found anything. So that in itself isn't proof, but it is, of course, very interesting. In all the pictorial depictions of, the channel tunnel from the side view, of course, the water is always depicted as a perfectly flat surface. In these 3D models, as far as I can tell, they are depicted as flowing under a flat surface. And then there's another clip I'm going to play at the end here, where they're talking to the head surveyor of the Eurotunnel project, and he doesn't mention curvature at all either. So this is really interesting when you're dealing with two sides that are tunneling from opposite directions, and the idea is to meet precisely in the middle at the predicted point under a massive amount of ocean water. Calculations have to be. There's no way that they could do this without calculating for curvature, because the idea is that they are, they have to remain low enough below the seabed, but if the water level is curving, then so there's real risk involved. Not only that, but like in all these depictions where the tunnel, because of the way that they have to follow the sediment, it doesn't go in a straight line down and then flatten out at the bottom and then a straight line up. It moves up and down and kind of snakes to go with this blue chalk layer that they tunnel through. So it makes it very hard to calculate the angles, which was basically the thing I was looking for, and so that's why I'm making this video, to basically throw it out there for other researchers to hopefully kind of jump on this and see what they can find, because that's really the missing key. That's really the data that I couldn't even find, was the gradient, the grade, the angle of decline and ascent, from one side down to the center point and then up again, because it changes many times throughout. It's not, like I said, it's not a straight, so it's not a simple thing to calculate. So that's kind of where I'm at, because what's interesting when you look at 656 feet of expected curvature, just to put that into perspective, that's essentially the height of two Big Ben towers put on top of each other, which almost would make the tunnel itself much closer to a straight line than having to dip down and then climb all the way back up. I mean, obviously, I don't believe the entrances are claimed to be exactly the same altitude from sea level as each other, but still, what is sea level? Is sea level being, is sea level across the project being considered to be a flat thing, or is it a relative thing depending on where you are, in accordance with the curve? So from where I stand, the projects like this are really interesting and probably deserving of a lot more intense scrutiny from just kind of people as a whole. So I feel like I've kind of tapped out on, I've kind of burned out on just reading about it and watching things on it, and yeah, I feel like there's a lot more to be ripped out of this, and I'm kind of curious to see what other people can find and what other specific calculations they can make in terms of, I've never been through the tunnel or whatever, but I wonder if there's even a way you could calculate decline and ascent from actually riding on it, if you had just your smartphone with a level app or whatever. So yeah, I'm just kind of looking for help and input and feedback, and I'm just curious what other people think about this. So here's another clip, just kind of again talking with that surveyor and the whole method of how they were calculating their direction as they dug the tunnel. So thanks for watching.
Disastrous. Flooding, or worse, tunnel collapse. It was imperative that the TBMs were guided along a safe and accurate route. That meant conducting one of the world's longest and most in-depth underground surveys. Rewind to August 1986, 18 months before tunneling began. When surveyor Eric Radcliffe took on the job of plotting the tunnel's course, he knew the scale of the challenge he faced.
France, you can see over there, that's the French coast. So we had all that way to drive the tunnel and keep it online for that 38 kilometers. Actually, from here it doesn't look too bad. but it's a long, long way.
Plotting an accurate course over such a long distance underground is a surveyor's nightmare. In tunnels, the normal rules of surveying don't apply. Surveyors normally work by measuring a series of angles at control points along the route. It's all a matter of geometry. Above ground, with 360-degree visibility, plotting a course is relatively simple. Eric Radcliffe explains the difference.
The whole road is opened to the air. All the survey control points from which you do the setting out are already established over the whole length.
Underground, there are obvious complications. All the surveyors can see is a wall of rock. They can't see ahead to plot the course. Roads have one other plus point over tunnels. Because they're flat strips on the landscape, they can only go off course in two directions: left or right. A tunnel occupies a three-dimensional space underground. It can go off course not only left or right, but also up or down. The two halves of the channel tunnel had 4 potential ways to miss meeting up. It's like asking a golfer to sink a hole-in-one blindfolded from 34 kilometers. To keep the tunnel on course and on target, the surveyors had to use a secret weapon: geology. Along its underground route, the tunnel would be driven through a layer cake of different soil and rock types, with very different consistencies. The geologists needed one stratum that went right across the channel. This stratum would provide a trail to help keep the British and the French tunnellers on course. But it must be exactly the right type of rock for tunnelling. Jean-Luc Dessein was one of the geophysicists charged with tracing the perfect stratum for the tunnel to follow. On the French side of the channel, Dessein began his search. It would have to be waterproof to resist flooding, and compact enough so it wouldn't collapse during the dig. In these cliffs, Dessein found his prize. Water poured over this seam of rock without soaking in, evidence that it was waterproof.
The soft rock, impervious, so no water in the tunnel. This is a perfect situation for boring a tunnel.
It's called blue chalk. But it was one thing to identify the ideal rock, another to discover its course. Geologists drilled a series of boreholes into the seabed and dropped probes that fired sound waves deep underground. The aim, to measure changes of speed in the sound waves as they passed through different rock and soil layers. It sounds straightforward, but it wasn't. Tracing the course of the blue chalk meant sinking 12 of these boreholes right across the channel, a tricky task in one of the world's busiest sea lanes.
You have a high traffic of vessels. You have a tide, you have waves, so it's a difficult place for making accurate investigations.
The geologists concluded the blue chalk would provide a feasible route across the channel. If they were wrong and the TBMs left the waterproof strata, they could hit waterlogged ground, with devastating consequences, flooding or even tunnel collapse.
Becomes imperative.
Canals and railways, for example, are always cut and laid horizontally, often over hundreds of miles, without any allowance for curvature. One surveyor, Mr. T. Westwood, wrote in the January 1896 Earth Review magazine stating that, "In leveling, I work from ordnance marks, or canal levels, to get the height above sea level. The puzzle to me used to be that over several miles each level was and is treated throughout its whole length as the same level from end to end, not the least allowance being made for curvature. One of the civil engineers in this district, after some amount of argument on each side as to the reason why no allowance for curvature was made, said he did not believe anybody would know the shape of the earth in this life. Another surveyor and engineer of 30 years wrote to the Birmingham Weekly Mercury, February 15, 1890, stating, "I am thoroughly acquainted with the theory and practice of civil engineering. However bigoted some of our professors may be in the theory of surveying according to the prescribed rules, yet it is well known amongst us that such theoretical measurements are incapable of any practical illustration. All our locomotives are designed to run on what may be regarded as true levels, or flats. There are, of course, partial inclines or gradients here and there, but they are always accurately defined and must be carefully traversed. But anything approaching to 8 inches in the mile, increasing as the square of the distance, could not be worked by any engine that was ever yet constructed. Taking one station with another all over England and Scotland, it may be stated that all the platforms are on the same relative level. The distance between eastern and western coasts of England may be set down as 300 miles. If the prescribed curvature was indeed as represented, the central stations at Rugby or Warwick ought to be close upon 3 miles higher than a cord drawn from the two extremities. If such was the case, there is not a driver or stoker within the kingdom that would be found to take charge of the train. We can only laugh at those of your readers who seriously give us credit for such venturesome exploits as running trains round spherical curves. Horizontal curves on levels are dangerous enough. Vertical curves would be 1,000 times worse, and with our rolling stock constructed as at present, physically impossible." Engineer W. Winkler wrote into the Earth Review, October 1893, regarding the Earth's supposed curvature, stating, "As an engineer of many years' standing, I saw that this absurd allowance is only permitted in school books. No engineer would dream of allowing anything of the kind. I have projected many miles of railways and many more of canals, and the allowance has not even been thought of, much less allowed for. This allowance for curvature means this, that it is 8 inches for the first mile of a canal, and increasing at the ratio by the square of the distance in miles. Thus a small navigable canal for boats, say 30 miles long, will have, by the above rule, an allowance for curvature of 600 feet. Think of that, and then please credit engineers as not being quite such fools. Nothing of the sort is allowed. We no more think of allowing 600 feet for a line of 30 miles of railway or canal than of wasting our time trying to square the circle. The Suez Canal, which connects the Mediterranean Sea with the Gulf of Suez on the Red Sea, is a clear proof of the earth's and water's non-convexity. The canal is 100 miles long, and without any locks, so the water within is an uninterrupted continuation of the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea. When it was constructed, the Earth's supposed curvature was not taken into account. It was dug along a horizontal datum line, 26 feet below sea level, passing through several lakes from one sea to the other, with the datum line and the water's surface running perfectly parallel over the 100 miles. The average level of the Mediterranean is 6 inches above the Red Sea, while the flood tides in the Red Sea rise 4 feet above the highest and drop 3 feet below the lowest in the Mediterranean, making the half-tide level of the Red Sea the surface of the Mediterranean Sea, and the 100 miles of water in the canal all a clear continuation of the same horizontal line. Were they instead the supposed curved line of globe earthers, the water in the center of the canal would be 1,666 feet above the respective seas on either side. David Wardlaw Scott wrote, "The distance between the Red Sea at Suez and the Mediterranean Sea is 100 statute miles, the datum line of the canal being 26 feet below the level of the Mediterranean, and is continued horizontally the whole way from sea to sea, there not being a single lock on the canal. The surface of water being parallel with the datum line, it is thus clear that there is no curvature or globularity for the whole 100 miles between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Had there been, according to the astronomic theory, the middle of the canal would have been 1,666 feet higher than at either end, whereas the canal is perfectly horizontal for the whole distance. The Great Canal of China, said to be 700 miles in length, was made without regard to any allowance for supposed curvature, as the Chinese believe the earth to be a stationary plane. I may also add that no allowance was made for it in the North Sea Canal, or in the Manchester Ship Canal, both recently constructed, thus clearly proving that there is no globularity in earth or sea, so that the world cannot possibly be a planet. Thomas Winship wrote, "If the earth be the globe of popular belief, it is very evident that in cutting a canal an allowance must be made for the curvature of the globe, which allowance would correspond to the square of the distance multiplied by 8 inches. From the Age of 5th August 1892 I extract the following. The German Emperor performed the ceremony of opening the gates of the Baltic and North Sea Canal in the spring of 1891. The canal starts at Holtenau on the south side of Kiel Bay and joins the Elbe 15 miles above its mouth. It is 61 miles long, 200 feet wide at the surface, and 85 feet at the bottom, the depth being 28 feet. No locks are required, as the surface of the two seas is level. Let those who believe it is the practice for surveyors to make allowance for curvature ponder over the following from the Manchester Ship Canal Company, Earth Review, October 1893. It is customary in railway and canal constructions for all levels to be referred to a datum which is nominally horizontal and is so shown on all sections. It is not the practice in laying out public works to make allowances for the curvature of the earth. The London and North Western Railway forms a straight line 180 miles long between London and Liverpool. The railroad's highest point, midway at Birmingham Station, is only 240 feet above sea level. If the world were actually a globe, however, curveting 8 inches per mile squared, the 180-mile stretch of rail would form an arc, with the center point at Birmingham raising a full 5,400 feet above London and Liverpool. Adding the station's actual height, 240 feet, to its theoretical inclination, 5,400 feet, gives 5,640 feet as the rail's necessary height on a globe Earth, more than 1,000 feet taller than Ben Nevis, the tallest mountain in Great Britain. Thomas Winship wrote, "In projecting railways on a globe, the datum line would be the arc of a circle corresponding to the latitude of the place. That the datum line for the railway projections is always a horizontal line proves that the general configuration of the world is horizontal. To support the globe theory, the gentlemen of the observatories should call upon the surveyor to prove that he allows the necessary amount for curvature, but this is what the learned men dare not do, as it is well known that the allowance for the supposed curvature is never made." David Wardlaw Scott wrote, "In a long line like that of the Great Pacific Railway, extending across North America, the supposed curvature would, of course, be proportionally great, extending to many miles in height, but not 1 inch was allowed by the engineers for curvature during the whole course of the construction of that vast line of railway. And if we think of it, how could it be otherwise? All railway metals must of necessity be straight, for how could any engine or carriage run with safety on a convex surface?" J.C. Bourne, in his book The History of the Great Western Railway, stated that the entire original English railroad, more than 118 miles long, that the whole line with the exception of the inclined planes, may be regarded practically as level. The British Parliament session in 1862 that approved its construction recorded in Order No. 44 for the proposed railway that the section be drawn to the same horizontal scale as the plan, and to a vertical scale of not less than 1 inch to every 100 feet, and shall show the surface of the ground marked on the plan, the intended level of the proposed work, the height of every embankment, and the depth of every cutting, and a datum horizontal line which shall be the same throughout the whole length of the work." Thomas Winship wrote, 118 miles of level railway, and yet the surface on which it is projected a globe? Impossible. It cannot be. Early in 1898 I met a Mr. Hughes, chief officer of the steamer City of Lincoln. This gentleman told me he had projected thousands of miles of level railway in South America, and never heard of any allowance for curvature being made. On one occasion he surveyed over 1,000 miles of railway, which was a perfect straight line all the way. It is well known that in the Argentine Republic and other parts of South America, there are railways thousands of miles long, without curve or gradient. In projecting railways, the world is acknowledged to be a plane, and if it were a globe, the rules of projection have yet to be discovered. Level railways prove a level world, to the utter confusion of the globular school of impractical men with high salaries and little brains. That in all surveys no allowance is made for curvature, which would be a necessity on a globe, that a horizontal line is in every case the datum line, the same line being continuous throughout the whole length of the work, and that the theodolite cuts a line at equal altitudes on either side of it, which altitude is the same as that of the instrument, clearly proves, to those who will accept proof when it is furnished, that the world is a plane.
Does the Ordnance Survey map account for curvature?
And
Yes.
that's exactly my point. Is
What?
until you go out
Yes.
there
Sorry,
and drop that
who's
tape
saying
measure
yes? I
down,
can't. Who's actually
you're
giving me a,
no
a
one's
concise
actually
answer
going
to
to get
that?
that
Survey map is a
information.
map.
Does it account for
Yeah.
curvature?
Well,
It doesn't need to count.
no,
Now,
it
what do you mean
references
count
everything to
for
sea
curvature?
level.
It
That's
doesn't
ridiculous.
account
That
for
is a
curvature. So we're
ridiculous
going to get the
question.
heights from something that's
Seriously.
not accounting for any curvature. Okay, just to get that clear. Good.
Now, can I
You've got that covered, Nathan, honestly.
Gents, can I just, I'm reading from the Ordnance Survey website itself, and on the actual website, I've just typed in, does it count for the curvature of the Earth? And this is what it actually says from the map makers that you guys are citing, and it says, a map has been described as a graphic representation of features on a plane surface that appear on a curved surface of the Earth. However, before the cartographer can design and produce a map, a surveyor has to collect the basic data. The Earth is described as a spheroid, being slightly flattened at both ends near the poles, and surveyors' measurements need to be reduced to map the projection plane. Does that therefore mean that they are making it a curved surface and they are backwards
Now,
engineered?
read that last sentence again, Anthony, because you misread it.
Yeah,
You
it
did
said it
not
right
read
there.
the words that were there.
Did I? The Earth is described as a spheroid.
No.
The Earth is described as a spheroid, being slightly flattened at the both ends near the poles, and surveyors' measurements need to be reduced to the map's projection plane. So my question
To
is...
the map projection plane.
So what I'm asking is...
Do you understand what a map projection plane is?
What I'm asking is, are they backwards engineering the maths to make it now look flat?
We need to introduce Mighty Mouse to the conversation. Welcome, Mighty Mouse.
Thanks, Lottie.
So, Paul, can you do this without a patronising tone? What are they saying? Are they saying that it is flat, or the back? It seems to me that they're saying that they start off with curved figures and then flatten it out by geodesity. Is that right?
No.
Right.
No.
Are they using a flat Earth map or are they using a curved Earth map? And it's that simple. So let's reduce it down to its basic constituent components, Paul, because you're clearly struggling. The Earth is described as a sphere. Let's call the word. We'll get rid of that and we'll just call the word sphere because it reduces letters for you. So balls as a. There we go. Sphere. And surveyors' measurements need to be reduced to the map projection plane. What are they reducing, Paul, if it's described as a sphere?
No, this is a diversionary tactic. You don't understand survey.
No.
I'm not going to entertain your ridiculous assertions, Anthony.
Paul, and surveyors' measurements.
What a total amount of nonsense.
To the map projection plane. So what are they reducing,
Lighthouse,
Paul?
this is not a Wikipedia
Paul,
reference.
What are they reducing?
Like 77.
Come on, Paul.
Height of focal plane,
Paul?
112.
What are they
All
reducing, Paul? I'll make it clear for everybody in chat so everybody can see it. What are they reducing? What?
You guys are never going to stop. You guys are never going to stop this debate.
It's a ridiculous assertion. It's a diversionary tactic.
Okay. Quite a few surveyors out there that claim that they take the curvature of the Earth into consideration. So I'm going to make a couple calls here. And let's just see what companies say when you actually call them at a surveying company, rather than talking to an individual online who very much, well, could be lying. So I'm going to name them off as I call them and leave it on speaker. Hopefully you guys can hear it. And this is Land Surveying Board down in Austin. It looks like it's a 512-239-5263.
Good morning, Texas Board of Professional Land Surveying.
help you?
Yes, Julia. I was calling to find out. I have about 20, 30 acres up in North Texas. And if I were to get a survey, you guys do surveys, correct?
Okay, not us.
Not you guys?
Um,
You're the board. You're like the board, I guess? Okay. Well, let me ask you a question real quick. When they do surveying for that distance of, let's say, 20 acres or so, or even 30 acres, do they take the curvature of the earth into consideration while they're doing the survey?
okay, you would have to speak with our executive director, and he has stepped out. Would you like to leave him a message? Yeah, I'm not a. Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Is there anybody there that is a surveyor that may know that's taking courses?
No, there's not.
Okay, and who am I? Who would I leave a message for? What is his name?
Okay, Tony Estrada. He's the executive director.
Executive Director Tony Estrada.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that'll be fine. Thank you.
Just a moment.
Well, Paso way over to Houston and everywhere in between.
I'll leave him a message for the hell of
But
it.
it ain't over yet by a long shot.
Then I'll type in whatever his response was when he calls back. But Executive Director, I'm probably going to get a bullshit answer, to be honest.
This is Tony Estrada with the Texas Board of Professional Land Surveying. Please leave your message after the tone, and I'll return your call as soon as possible.
Yeah, Tony, my name is Chris. I had a question. I got about 30 acres up in North Texas. I was thinking about getting surveyed, and my number is 214-649-2879. I just have a question about how you guys go about your surveying, or companies that you know of or refer to or whatnot. I appreciate it. Thank you. All right, this is TSPS. And they're also in Austin. 512-327-7871.
Good afternoon, TSPS. This is Brenda.
Yeah, Brenda, do you guys do land surveying?
No, we don't.
Oh, what do y'all do?
We're the association
You're the association.
of surveyors, yes, but we personally, there's not a surveyor on our staff.
Are you familiar with surveying and how they go about doing it?
I am familiar with surveying. I do not survey.
Okay, well, I just have a question, really. I have about 30 acres up in North Texas. And when they come out and they do surveys, do they take into consideration the curvature of the earth when they do that?
Yes, they do.
And how do they go about doing that?
That I don't know.
Oh. They just do.
I would suggest you follow surveyor.
Okay. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. All right, well, strike two, TSPS. I'm not getting... All right, Sands Surveying Corporation. I mean, is everybody just a bunch of consultants or board members? How many do we need? All right, Arthur. No, this is Sands. That was Arthur. No, that was TSPS. This is Arthur Surveying Company. And this is 940-435-5155.
Arthur Surveying, this is Diana.
Yeah, Diana, do you guys actually do the surveying? Land surveying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. If I ask you a question, would you be able to answer? Or?
If I can, I'll connect you to somebody that could.
Okay, well, I have about 30 acres up in North Texas, and I was looking about possibly getting them surveyed, and I'm kind of in a dispute here. Do you guys take into consideration when you do your surveying the curvature of the earth?
Well, you mean like the topographical?
Yeah, yeah, for just the land survey.
Okay. We would go out and locate the boundary,
Okay.
and then what other surveying that you need beyond that, being a topographical or a tree, we can do.
But if it's just a flat land, wouldn't you take the consideration of the curvature of the Earth whenever you do that, or you don't? It's just not in the realm. I don't know.
You know what? I cannot answer that question, but if you'll hold on, I'll see if we can find somebody that can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Where's the 30 acres located?
It's up there by the border of Oklahoma and by Texarkana, if you will. By Oklahoma, Texas, Texarkana. I don't have the land up there. Would you like the person over at the other one? Yes, they do.
We appreciate your call. Our entire staff welcomes the opportunity to serve you. We'll be with you in just a moment.
Sorry, I can't make the video shorter when I'm on hold.
Thank you for calling. Please continue holding. Someone will be with you shortly.
You can fast forward it.
This is Jack.
Yes, hello, Jack. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Good, good. Did she mention my question to you, or?
Yes, she had Diana told me you had something to do with the curvature of the Earth and when we were doing our survey.
Yeah, when you do your land surveys, do you guys take that into consideration or no?
Well, as far as, are you talking, I'm assuming you're saying in regards to the acreage, calculations of the acreage or the distances?
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of times what we'll do, we use a GPS state, and it's on state plane coordinates.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So with any map, I mean, our drawing is going to show, any map is going to try to flatten out the surface of the Earth, which, you know, we both know is curved. But they use different, they're called projections, and we do it on what's called grid distance when we do the field work.
Uh-huh.
So those it does take that into account. Now, we don't sit here and physically, you know, adjust our acreage or our distances for that, but the GPS has the settings when it's on grid state plane coordinates that does adjust for that.
Gotcha. Okay, but it's all done on the GPS system.
Most of the time, I don't know. Have we done a survey for you?
No, you haven't. I'm just kind of calling around.
Okay. Yeah. Now, what we do show on the survey, I can tell you this, is straight line distances. Like let's say you have an acre of land and there's a large hill on it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that 200 feet is going to be measured straight line distance, not 200 feet up the hill. That's called float distance.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. But yeah, just the observations with the GPS do take into consideration the curvature of the Earth, the general curvature of the Earth. I mean, there's features that's not a flat surface like hills and things that are that we're just going to show the straight line distance.
So when you show the straight line distance, does it take the hills out of it, I guess?
Yes. Yeah, and because what it does, the way that works, it calculates a uniform radius for the circle for the Earth, which I mean, there's different elevation changes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It assumes a uniform radius.
Gotcha. Okay.
As if it were just a smooth sphere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I do appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, is there anything else I can help you out with?
No, that'll do it. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks. Bye. All right, did you catch that? Straight line. Straight line that cuts through the hills. But then the GPS supposedly automatically takes into consideration for the curvature. As we both know, it's round. But he uses a straight line. Get it? Cuts through the hills. Huh? straight line. Some people really just don't understand what the hell they're saying when they say it. It's funny. Sands Surveying Corporation. 817-355-5253. Let's see what BS they can throw out. Said thanks for calling Sands Surveying. See, they just believe in computers. The GPS. Yes, hello? Yes, do y'all do land surveying?
We do land surveying. What type of surveying do you need?
Well, I have a question. I have some pretty flat land up in North Texas area, about 20, 30 acres, and I was calling to find out, can you answer questions, or do I need to talk to somebody there? Or?
Ken wants to do.
Well, it's in North Texas. By Texarkana, I guess. Well, yeah. I mean, do you guys travel all over Texas, or?
No, so in order to get a fair price, you would need to Google Texarkana, Texas land surveyors. We're in Dallas, Fort Worth. That's about possibly a 3-hour drive, and I would charge you drive time to get there and drive time to get back, plus the time on the ground and the survey.
Okay, well, can I just ask you a question then about the surveying? If I have about 20 or 30 acres, it's pretty flat.
What question are you asking?
Well, when you guys do run a survey of the land and it's flat, it's really not many hills there at all. Do you take into consideration the curvature of the Earth?
Absolutely.
And well, how do y'all do that? I guess is it on a GPS, like a computer, or?
Well, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, which we're in, we go to North Texas COG TLT. We do a Google map search on it. We do a COD map search on it. It shows that we can pull up the terrain. We can pull up the latest and greatest Google map. We look as far as the terrain. We look to see if it's clear. We look for ponds crossing the boundaries. Because all of that is time frame on the ground.
So it's the COG map, I guess, that just automatically puts it in there for you?
That's the Dallas-Fort Worth area maps, yes.
Yeah, okay, so they automatically put...
In Texarkana, if I was in Texarkana, I would probably use the appraisal district out of Texarkana. I don't know how well they have it set up. A lot of the appraisal districts will have a map that they have taken of the land.
Okay, but I was just trying to figure out the...
A lot of research.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just trying to figure out exactly how they do take into consideration the curvature. I didn't know how they do that. I mean, if it's a flat plane of acreage and, they put it at so many acres and, what are the distance? I mean, the distance would change if it was curved or if it was completely flat. That's why I didn't know. Is it just set up within the GPS systems that you have already, or?
No, they have to do the on-the-ground measurements. Each professional land surveyor has to do their on-the-ground measurements. They don't rely on all of these other maps once they get to the ground. They research the other maps to get to the ground.
Okay.
If some other surveyor said it was 2,100 square, 2,050 feet from one side to the other, they don't rely on that. They have to do their individually licensed. So they are licensed to do their own work. If they are using another map to do their work in the office and not go to the field, they should lose their license.
Okay, but when they do it on the land themselves, how do they justify for the curve? Do they use those lasers, I guess, or?
No, they actually measure the curves.
Well, how do they do that? I guess that's what I'm trying to find out.
Yeah, there's a lot of calculation, trigonometry. They are one of the best mathematicians that you'll ever come across. So when I don't know how to say it. They do it. I don't know how they do their job.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. I appreciate your time then. Thanks. What did I just hear? Sound like a bunch of mumbling. All right, getting some different opinions here. Couldn't they all just come up with the same exact answer? No, we don't. All right, here we go. David C. Moak Surveyors. This is 817, so I think it's up in the Louisville, Denton area. 817-268-2211.
This is David.
Yeah, David, do you do land surveying?
Yes.
Okay, I just have a question. I'm trying to get cleared up here. I may get some of my land surveyed, but when you guys do the land surveys, and if it's a flat plane, do you guys take into consideration the curvature of the Earth?
Well, typically on a small area, anything under 1,000 acres, it's really irrelevant. It kind of depends on the equipment we use. We can, but we usually don't worry about that unless we're dealing with a long linear project.
What would be the shortest? You said over 1,000 feet before you would take that into consideration, or 1,000?
What type of project is it?
It's about 20 acres of land, just flat land.
Yeah, I really don't see it applicable. I mean, there's not that much correction in that small of a tract, but
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's what I was just trying. I'm just trying to figure that out. That's all. I mean, they got one a while back on the land, and I'm kind of debating whether or not to do it again, just to find out exactly how they're doing it.
yeah, you're not talking about a topography, are you?
Getting
Like the grade, the slope of the land, is that what you're really referring to, or are you actually referring to curvature?
Well, mainly towards the curvature. I mean, they already have that in there on their other survey that I got a while back, a long time ago, about 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, who did it?
Oh boy, I can't remember the name of it. I just have it on a black and white sheet of paper, to be honest. That just kind of has its numbers on there. I don't even know if the name of the company's at the top of the paper or not. I don't have it in front of me. It's in my land folder, if you will.
Yeah, right.
So.
Well, you can certainly email me, the description of the property and what you're wanting done, and we can take a look at it. I'm away from the office right now, and we're having some phone problems at the office, so they're forwarding to my cell, and so I'm a little handicapped not being able to look at files or anything from here, but if you want to drop me an email with the particulars, then I'll be happy to look at it.
Yeah, hold on just a second. Let me get a piece of paper here. What's your email? DW, D as in dog?
D as in David, W as in Wayne, M as in Meyer.
Oh, yeah, okay.
At moaksurveyors.com. M-O-A-K surveyors.
At moaksurveys.com. Okay, DWM at moaksurveyors.com.
That's it.
Okay, great, I appreciate it.
You bet, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye. So, they don't even take it into consideration on, what did he say, 1,000 feet or something? I can't remember. Or what he initially said, but they don't really mess with it unless it's really far. But again, do the math at however many miles squared, they have to take it into somewhat consideration, one would think. Because when you start squaring it, well, that's what happens. All right, we're at 20 minutes now. Sorry, see, man, it really kind of sucks that it's this long. But all right, let's go Tucker Surveyors. Let's go here. 817-295-2999. I mean, everybody's answering it differently. If it's all one schooling and they all do the surveying, shouldn't they all have the same answer? Yes, you guys do land surveying? We do. I just had a question. I got about 20, 30 acres up in North Texas, kind of around Decatur. And if I were to get a survey done, I had one done about 3 or 4 years ago. And I was just curious whether or not you guys, or how you do, measure for the curvature of the Earth from that distance. Or do you even take that into consideration for such a small area?
Yeah, the curvature doesn't really come into play. We're doing everything plane geometry.
Plane geometry?
Yeah, we're doing everything flat surface.
Okay.
We base everything off of a level surface, even though there is curvature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm just getting different conflicting answers, I guess. I'm trying to figure this out because, I mean, I do have a few hills in there, but one person had mentioned that they use a straight line that goes through the hills.
Right. And that would be plane geometry. It's flat, assuming it's a flat surface.
Yeah, okay.
We do everything. We don't do anything on slope distance. We do everything on horizontal distance.
Ah, okay.
We take all the slope. You know, if you're looking at a right side triangle laying down, if you're measuring down a hill, or say, you know, you're 100 feet from a flagpole, and the top of the flagpole is where your house sits, but the actual distance would be at the base of that flagpole. So we do, you know, we use right triangles we use the slope distance, but we also use the zenith angle to create the horizontal distance.
Okay, because that brings up a question too. Like when it comes to roofing, you know, there's different slopes of the roof, which can equivalent to different, I guess, the length of the roof, if you will, on the way that does it. So that's why I was just kind of curious on how that worked out. I don't know if it's kind of sense.
Yeah, it's not the same as a roof of a house. Because on the roof of a house, you're looking at surface area.
Yeah.
Not looking at area. Surface area and area would be two different things. You pull that roof up, you know, horizontally or flat from the ground instead of on slopes like that.
Yeah.
Then you're gonna have two different areas.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, well, I got you listed here. I'm kind of debating too, and because I'm thinking about selling the land too, so it's all kind of up in the air. But I'll definitely keep you in mind whenever I'm ready.
Okay.
All right, thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Bye. All right, last one, so we're not too long here. Texas Professional Surveying, LLC. Those are all 817. Now I got a 936. I don't know where that's at. 936-756-7447.
Surveying.
Yes, you do land surveying?
Yes, we do.
Okay, if I ask some questions to you, can I ask you, or do I need to talk to somebody else, or?
Yeah, what's going on?
Well, I have about 30 acres up there in North Texas, just around the Decatur.
Where is it located? Where I can see if we even go there.
Around the Decatur area?
Where?
Decatur?
Yeah, we don't go that far.
Okay, well then can I ask you a question then?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Just trying to compare to a couple other people that I'm calling out. It's it's pretty flat out there, and I'm thinking about selling it. But anyway, do you guys, if you do the measurements from that distance, do you take into consideration the curvature of the Earth for like a greater distance than rather just a flat plane, or?
Okay, yeah, that would be something for my surveyor, and they're not in the office right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I couldn't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Okay. And nobody's in there that possibly could?
Not at this time, no, sir. You could try back maybe probably about 3 or 4.
Okay.
Okay?
Alrighty.
All right, sir. Sorry about that.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, that's all I was going to do, but since they can't answer that themselves, I'm going to go one more. South Texas Surveying Associates. I don't know what they do, but 281-556-6918. Last one.
Good afternoon, South Texas
Yeah, Chris, I have a couple questions. I have about 30 acres flat land. Do you have? Can you answer a couple questions, or do I need to talk to a surveyor there, or do you have one?
I can try and answer. What you got?
Well, it's pretty flat. And I got a survey a few years back, and I was just curious because I'm not sure if how or even if they did. When it comes to the curvature of the Earth, do you take that into consideration in regards to that distance, or not?
Possibly. You said we did the survey before?
No, you guys didn't. I don't know who did. I just have the topography of it. But on the actual survey itself, I'm not sure if they ever did. But do you guys take it into consideration or not?
Yeah, I believe we do.
Do you know how they do that?
I believe they do it when they do their GPS.
Okay, so it's already included within the GPS system, because I have had somebody mention that before.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Okay, great. That's all I needed to hear.
Okay.
Thanks.
No problem.
Bye-bye. Man, I got to get one more real one. Surveyor, but... Proline Surveying. 817-276-1148. Yes, you guys run land surveys?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to, I guess, ask a question. Can you answer questions, or?
I can try.
Okay. I got a survey a few years back, 3 or 4 years ago, and I just have a topography, but when it comes to the distance, of 30 or so acres, do you guys take into consideration the curvature of the Earth when it comes to that kind of distance?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think it has to be much greater for that to come into play.
Okay, it has to be much bigger than that to come into play. Do you know what kind of how long does it have to be before it does?
I'm not sure, man. You might try Google.
Okay. All right, man.
Yeah, I've had a little experience in it, but I can't remember offhand. But I think if you just Google that, it should come up.
Okay. All right. Hey, I appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks. They don't. So there you have it. You decide.
Are a surveyor, and you are, I believe, a plane surveyor, right? Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, so in comparison, as far as numbers of actual surveyors on the ground out there surveying the world as we know it, would you say the great majority of the surveyors out there are actually plane surveyors, or would they be geodetic surveyors? And if it's plane surveyors, how many more plane surveyors are there than geodetic surveyors?
I would say that there's probably quite a bit more plane surveyors than geodetic surveyors, because geodetic surveyors are basically what sets up the WGS-84 and state plane coordinate system. They're the ones that come up with that mathematical construct.
Right, that nobody can see in the WGS-84. And the reason I ask this is because I'm sitting here watching the chat, and we have one of our favorite trolls, Charlie, in the chat. And, he's making a comment back to Antonio where he says, Antonio, perhaps so. Is this surveyor a specialist in geodetic surveying or plane surveying? If the latter, no real point. In other words, what he's doing, he's just saying, plane surveyors, we're just going to discount them. They mean nothing. They're completely irrelevant to this discussion. And to that, I say that is about the most idiotic statement I have ever heard in my life, especially when you have the majority of plane surveyors out there that are really doing the work, really doing the actual, differential leveling and equations and stuff like that. I just can't believe some of the statements that come out as a result of cognitive dissonance or trying to push a model that they're being paid to push out of some of these trolls. So I just wanted to ask that question because I suspected that there were probably a ton more plane surveyors than geodetic surveyors.
Yeah, and something else I'll add in is I've been thinking about this. It's kind of like, if you were putting like a tile floor in your bathroom or your living room, where you have 1 foot squares, and then you put them side by side by side by side, and you have a flat level floor. Basically, that's the same as plane surveying. We survey out a mile by a mile area, and the next area next to it isn't any different than the one next to it, the one next to it, the one next to it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question for you, Chris?
Sure.
Okay, so do you use like a theodolite when you do this?
Yes.
Okay, and
theodolite and GPS.
Okay, and do the theodolites, do they still use a convex lens?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, because I was just having this sort of argument again in chat the other day with somebody who comes up as a surveyor. They say they see. If I can share my screen real quick, that'd be awesome. It'll just take a second.
Yeah, hang on just a second, John. Let me prep that.
Okay, and
Charlie, Charlie, in the meantime, he's saying a plane surveyor does not measure the shape of the Earth. That is not their job. They set things up on a plane. Like, oh wow. This is what we're discussing, that they set things up on a plane because this is a plane. The other guys are just theoretical. This dude doesn't, yeah.
Well, it's what he's paid to do, Antonio. Everybody knows Charlie's a troll. Everybody knows Charlie's paid to do this. So, Charlie, you got to understand, you're not convincing anybody of anything. People just kind of look at you for comedy relief because nobody's really buying what you're saying. So, but anyway, knock yourself out. Go ahead, John. You're ready to screen share.
Okay, and so this was an argument that I think was very well done way back in the 1800s in Geodetic, and I had assumed for this whole time correctly, because I did look into it, and I had just assumed that 2017 was no different than 2 years ago in a sense that theodolites use convex lenses. And so and this is even what Robotham was arguing, even testing the equipment, is that if you level out your theodolite, because of refraction in the convex lens, you get this sort of apparent drop of the horizon line, only through the lens, of course, compared to whatever you're leveling crosshairs or whatever that true level is. That is due to the refraction of the convex lens, has nothing to do with the curve of the Earth, and yet there are still surveyors that are making this argument. So if you've got a theodolite that's leveled out to the ground, so you know that the thing's level, and it's facing the horizon, which you know is a certain distance based on your elevation, what surveyors are seeing is the horizon apparently drop a little bit. This is probably exaggerated to show the point, but the surveyors are seeing the horizon drop a little bit compared to the level, which is indicated by these crosshairs, but only through the lens. And so I just thought maybe you could comment on that and its accuracy, because I always thought it was a fabulous argument from Robotham, not ever me personally using a theodolite. So just your thoughts on it, maybe.
I've kind of expressed this quite a few times that let's see, how would I? If you're just slightly off level, let's say that it's 1/100th of a foot off level where you're standing. So the further you project that out, the bigger the gap is going to be. So I don't think, in my own personal opinion, that a theodolite is accurate enough to do the measurements that they're doing, the geodesists. And then I believe that geodesists kind of fall in the same category with astrophysicists. They're handed their mathematics, and they go out and they make observations, and their math concludes that there's actual Earth curvature through their math.
Right. Yeah, that rings true with me, and that makes a lot of sense why you would have surveyors coming out and saying, well, we know the Earth isn't flat because of this, or whatever reasons, but they are slaves to their own hypothetical numbers, slaves to the construct, because they can't think outside of the box to say, well, what if the Earth's flat and this is just refraction, right? So.
Right, or heat waves. Heat waves take a lot of it, because all the transits are focused out to infinity.
Right, okay.
So it's not like a zoom lens on a camera where you can bring in from 200 millimeters to 500 millimeters. They're focused to infinity, and when that happens, you bring in all that atmospheric distortion.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting.
Interesting. Okay, great. Thanks,
I
Chris.
think it's even, and I don't know if this is the best time to bring it up, but there is a large issue that I think is going to come up in the future, and people probably should start looking into it. But kind of what you're describing here, John, and it's also from Robotham, when the Bedford level experiment didn't go as planned for Hampton, that was because when you looked out from the bridge and you had these, let's say these poles at 10 feet high off the water tops, the reason he lost the so-called bet was because in the telescope, those poles fell down in the distance. And they called that the curvature of the Earth. And then Robotham came back and stated, and this is one when I've told people, they're like, what are you talking about? That if you line up a telescope and level it from your position and then aim it, or, it's leveled and it's hitting the top of those 10-foot poles, that those poles will fall down in the eyepiece of the telescope. And people will say that that's the curvature of the Earth. And what Robotham was saying is it is not. You need to you need to actually tilt the telescope to hit the first and second pole, the tops of each. And then if that line stays even with the telescope or the telephone poles all the way down, then the Earth is flat. This is the whole thing that got the Bedford level experiment on a crazy one. And I was trying to explain it on Raw last week, and Missa was kind of at a place where she was starting to see the whole idea of the Earth being curved by that experiment. What I eventually had to do to get her to see it is I said, imagine you put a telescope level up on top of a cloud. Okay, so we know that the clouds in the distance go down to the horizon, but that telescope placed on top of a cloud above your head, if it was level, would shoot out into space. It would not follow the clouds as they go down to the horizon. That's a much bigger example, or a much wider kind of metaphor, but really that's the same thing as us on the ground. That's why theodolites measure drop, is because you're looking through a telescope and items I don't want to say in reality, but to us, they get smaller as they go towards the horizon. Well, a telescope cannot, the same thing doesn't happen to a telescope, because just like in your picture here, all the telescope sees is this circle, right? That's all it sees. It can only go into that circle and come out of that circle. It doesn't see anything more than that. And so if you had poles going down all the way to the horizon, it drops per the crosshairs, kind of like you're showing here. It's a combination of both. But I think that that's going to come up, and that's why I wanted to do my experiment by the lake, because it's going to show when we shoot the laser through and hit the wood planks versus when we send the theodolite through, that the theodolite will eventually, in my opinion, see wood, because it's going to show a drop. But it's not a drop.
Yeah.
That's an excellent point, Jaron. And you can do the same thing with a camera. If you set up a camera and you pick out something far off in the distance and you start zooming in, you have to pull the camera down to bring that back into the picture.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And Chris, real quick, our guest last week basically made a suggestion, a request, if you could describe a little bit about what the theodolite does and how it works, just for the benefit of the audience.
Basically, it's just a telescope with crosshairs in it, set up with now that it's all digital, the levels within is all digital, but basically you have a level bubble that's in both directions, so that you can level it perfectly in all directions. Basically, it's just a telescope with crosshairs built into it.
Okay.
And I will say, throughout the years here, in the last 7 or 8 years, the equipment and the theodolites they're giving us, it's you used to be able, with the older stuff, you could go 1.5 miles, 2 miles if you didn't have lots of heat waves. This newer equipment, we can't go more than like 1,400 feet with the optics, and they have degraded the instrumentation that we're using.
Wow, really? That's pretty counterintuitive.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
And one other thing that I'd like you to clarify, Chris, because this is something that it amazes me that people make this mistake, but I'll just make the statement and you tell me if I am correct or not. Theodolites do not measure curvature. They do not measure arc. They measure slope, and then from that resulting slope measurements, you use your trigonometry to then calculate your elevations. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, that's spot on.
Do you use GPS as well?
Yes, I use GPS whenever we do really long projects, or we want to go out and shoot maybe like I was on a big project that was 60 miles long. We use GPS because you can go 60, 70, 100, 200 miles with GPS over long distances. Really quick measurements with GPS.
Yeah. And Chris also has some really interesting stories about what he's found out about GPS by some of the people that he's talked to in the field. But maybe if we have time, we can go over that a little bit. But every time Chris comes over, he's always telling me some really interesting stories that he finds out. And of course, these are the experiences that he has that are part of many experiences and tests and measurements and stuff that has built his preponderance of evidence, and the reason why he calls himself a flat earther. So, like I said, guys, we don't come to these realizations or these conclusions about the shape of what we're actually standing on just arbitrarily. It usually takes several things. It's a composite, a preponderance of many things. So that's how it's done. But man, that looks like an old-timey one. Is that is that a really old one, Chris? Or that doesn't look like anything I normally see the surveyors using.
Yes, that's extremely old. Like I said, the ones we have nowadays, all you have is your eyepiece, you level it up, and basically it's just a telescope with crosshairs in it that are extremely accurate.
All right.
Are you talking about an electronic one? Does he have an electronic one or just a non-electronic one?
Yeah, the one that I use is actually robotic. Nowadays, you used to have somebody standing behind it to turn angles and stuff, and nowadays it's all robotic. It communicates with radios and laser lights. You don't even have to have anybody standing behind them anymore. You can go out by yourself and do all the work.
Yeah, and Chris, you've been doing this for 30 plus years, is that correct?
Yeah, right around 30 years.
There you go. I'd call that a veteran, for sure.
And then just something else I want to throw in. When I first started looking into flat Earth, I went into the office with everybody sitting there one day, and I asked everybody, what is the equation for calculating the curvature of the Earth? And everybody looked at me like a deer in the headlight. Nobody could answer the question, and I think that says volumes about not using the equation for Earth's curvature for anything that we do.
I don't doubt that a bit because, as I told you, I used to build point-to-point microwave systems all across the country. And, I was a field engineer actually out there in the trenches building them. And, we had calculations for Fresnel zones, for, date and backup, redundant receivers in case you got any path fade, anything like that. But again, when you're doing it, you don't ever think about the curvature there, even though it is plotted out, guys. So don't hit me with that. I am aware of it. It is plotted out. But, when you're actually in the field and doing the field engineering, it seems logical to you because we're always either on the highest ridge on a plane, or we have the shot taking place from a mountaintop or whatever, so you automatically think that that's the thing that's going to get you over any obstruction. But I have to tell you that I never ever knew about the 8 inches per mile curvature, or even the Sagitta or anything like that that involved dealing directly with the mathematics of the curvature of the Earth. So that just goes to show you that, regardless of the fact you're working in the field and are actually, a professional in it, there are just some things that you simply accept on face value because you were told so, and the fact that, it's working, right? So why would you ever want to question it? So I sympathize with your other surveyors that they don't understand that, and I'm sure you probably weren't ever really taught that either, were you, when you were first learning about it?
Absolutely not. It was never mentioned in all the years that I surveyed.
Yeah. So
the only time it comes up is when we're working in the state plane coordinate system, And basically all they're doing in the state plane coordinate system is scaling distances up and down.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. Well, that just goes to show you, and this is what we were talking about earlier. This is the education system for you, because they teach you what you need to know, pretty much bare minimum, because they certainly don't want to give you any more information than what you could possibly use on whatever career you're doing, because heaven forbid you figure out something else that they don't want you to know about.
Hey, what's up, Chris? Hey. Say what's up, man. Your name's Chris. You're a flat earther. You're a land surveyor and a pilot, correct?
Absolutely. And the Earth is flat.
Yeah, that's true.